What would you do if you woke up one day and realized your body was failing you, and no one was coming to help? The morning started like any other, or so it seemed. Mary Sullivan's kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon from the night before, one of her late-night baking sprees, a habit she picked up after her husband died. She stood barefoot on the cold tile floor, reaching for her favorite yellow mug when it happened. A sharp, dizzying pain surged through her chest and up to her jaw. Her hand slipped. The mug shattered. And then she collapsed. The silence afterward was deafening. No cries for help. No footsteps running down the hallway. Just the sound of her own ragged breathing and the relentless ticking of the wall clock. 3 hours passed before she could drag herself upright with the help of a kitchen chair. By then, the pain had dulled into a dangerous ache, and her head felt like it was floating somewhere outside her body. Mary dialed 911, not because she thought she was dying, but because, for the first time, she knew she couldn't handle this alone. The ER was cold. Sterile. The kind of place that feels like it doesn't want you to get too comfortable. Nurses and techs moved around her like shadows. Routine tests. EKG. Blood work. An older doctor with tired eyes finally walked in, clipboard in hand, and asked, "Mrs. Sullivan, are you here alone?" She nodded. "My daughter lives in California. It's just me here." He sat down. "Mary, I won't sugarcoat this. You've got a number of overlapping issues: chronic inflammation, arrhythmia, early signs of kidney stress, not to mention dangerously low magnesium and vitamin D levels. You're also borderline diabetic." Mary stared at him, trying to absorb the words. It felt like someone had just dumped 13 puzzle pieces on the table and told her to put them together, blindfolded. "I suggest a full diagnostic workup. Maybe even a hospital stay. Your body is essentially trying to shut itself down, piece by piece." He meant well. But all she heard was, "You're failing." Back home, the silence was louder than ever. She tried calling Julie, voicemail. Again. And again. Left a message. Nothing. She stared at the window as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across her linoleum floor. The same floor Paul used to mop every Saturday morning while singing off-key to the Beatles. The same floor their dog, Daisy, used to slide across chasing tennis balls. Empty now. Just a ghost town filled with memories. Later that night, she scrolled through Facebook with a numb thumb. Everyone else seemed to be thriving: family barbecues, retirement trips, photos of grandchildren. Then an ad caught her eye. "Seniors, use baking soda like this and watch 13 health problems disappear. Elon Musk tips." Mary rolled her eyes. Another scam. But something made her click. It was a video, homemade, amateur, but compelling. A gray-haired man, ex-military, sitting in his garden, talking directly to the camera. "After 62, your body doesn't bounce back. Doctors kept giving me pills. I started feeling like a walking pharmacy. Then I stumbled across Elon Musk's wellness team talking about something simple. Baking soda. Not for cleaning, though it does that too, but for restoring your internal balance. Not a cure, but a start." Mary watched all 12 minutes of it. She learned that baking soda, in small amounts, had been studied for its impact on systemic pH, inflammation, digestion, and even certain metabolic markers. The man mentioned how a teaspoon dissolved in water each morning had helped him wean off 6 different medications, with medical supervision, of course. It sounded ridiculous. But so did the idea that she'd live the rest of her life like this, sick, alone, forgotten. The next day, Mary sat at her kitchen table, notebook open. She scribbled a list titled, 13 problems I need to solve, before they solve me. 1. Heart palpitations. 2. Chronic fatigue. 3. Sleep issues. 4. Joint pain. 5. Bloating. 6. Brain fog. 7. Low mood. 8. Muscle cramps. 9. Acid reflux. 10. High blood sugar. 11. Hair thinning. 12. Dry skin. 13. Isolation. She underlined the last one twice. Then she stared at the box of baking soda in her cupboard. The same box she'd used last Thanksgiving to make pumpkin pie crust. Could this humble white powder really be her first step toward healing? She poured a glass of filtered water, hesitated, then added half a teaspoon of baking soda. It fizzed. She drank it. The taste was awful. But for the first time in a long while, Mary felt something stir inside her. Not in her stomach, but somewhere deeper. A flicker of rebellion. A whisper, "I'm not done yet." That night, sleep didn't come easy. Her mind raced, what if this was stupid? What if she made herself worse? She turned on the lamp, grabbed her laptop, and typed into Google, "Elon Musk baking soda health routine." To her surprise, she found a string of forums, people speculating that part of Musk's extreme biohacking habits included alkaline therapy, intermittent fasting, and yes, even controlled sodium bicarbonate use for cellular energy optimization. Half the posts were nonsense. The other half made her curious. Then she stumbled upon a comment. "There's a private group on Signal for seniors using natural protocols. Reach out if you're serious." She bookmarked it. And for the first time in weeks, she wrote something in her journal besides grocery lists and blood pressure numbers. "I think I'm ready to fight back." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Mary Sullivan had always been the type of person who gave. She didn't know how to be anything else. From the time she was a little girl, she had learned the value of helping others. Her mother, a soft-spoken woman with gentle hands, had taught her that a warm meal and a kind word could turn someone's day around. "A little bit of kindness can go a long way," she would say, her eyes sparkling with a wisdom only the truly selfless could possess. As Mary grew older, this lesson stayed with her. She became the go-to person in the neighborhood, the one people called when they needed someone to watch their kids, when their car broke down, or when they just needed a friendly ear. She was that person for her friends and family, never hesitating to step in whenever someone needed help, no matter how small or large the task. Mary's career as a middle school teacher only deepened her connection to this giving nature. Every morning, she would arrive early, ready to inspire her students, knowing that some of them faced challenges at home, struggles they wouldn't share with anyone. Mary could see the glimmer of potential in each of them, the way they lit up when they finally grasped a concept they had been struggling with. And she was always there, ready to encourage, ready to guide. She understood that sometimes, what a child needed most wasn't just a teacher, but someone who truly cared. But her life wasn't always this filled with purpose. When she was young, there had been the other Mary, the one who longed to leave her small town, explore the world, and see what was out there beyond the confines of suburbia. That was when she met Paul, a young man with big dreams and a heart full of adventure. He had a charm about him that made everyone smile, and before long, they had a life planned out, marriage, kids, a house with a white picket fence. The kind of life that was straight out of a 1950s television show. But things didn't go as planned. Paul was diagnosed with cancer when Mary was just 42. What followed was a decade of hospital visits, endless doctor's appointments, and days where Mary felt like she was slowly losing herself. Watching her husband deteriorate, feeling helpless, seeing the man she once knew so full of life become a shell of himself, it broke her. But through it all, she stayed strong. She was the one who held it all together, the one who was always there, always smiling, even when she felt as if she were falling apart on the inside. When Paul passed away, it felt like the ground beneath her feet had been ripped away. The grief was suffocating, and for the first time in years, Mary felt lost. She was no longer someone's wife, no longer part of the pair that had dreamed together of the future. She was just Mary, alone. Her daughter, Julie, had moved to California to pursue her career, and though they spoke often, it was hard to feel connected when Julie's life was so far removed from her own. Life after Paul was a quiet existence. Mary kept herself busy with her garden, her books, and her cooking. She had always loved to bake, and while it had once been a shared hobby with Paul, it became something she did to fill the silence, something that kept her hands occupied when the loneliness threatened to swallow her whole. The oven was a constant companion, its warmth a small comfort in a house that sometimes felt too big. But even with her baking and her quiet life, there was always this nagging feeling that something was missing. She had spent so many years giving to others, putting their needs before her own, that she didn't know what it meant to take care of herself. To invest in her own well-being. To ask, what do I need? And then came that moment, the one she would never forget, the moment when she realized how much she had neglected her own health. The moment her body began to protest. Her once easygoing nature was replaced with chronic fatigue, joint pain, insomnia, and the feeling that she was slowly becoming a stranger in her own skin. It wasn't just the physical symptoms, it was the emotional toll. The feeling that she was invisible. Her daughter, Julie, was still far away. Mary had called her the night before her fall in the kitchen, leaving yet another voicemail. Julie was always too busy with her career to truly understand what Mary was going through. They'd spoken on the phone about it, Mary's health, the loneliness, but those were just conversations that ended with, "I love you, Mom," and a promise to visit soon. But soon never came. And so, Mary found herself alone in the quiet of her kitchen, staring down at that box of baking soda, thinking about all the years she had spent focusing on everyone else's needs while neglecting her own. In many ways, Mary had spent her whole life caring for others. But now, for the first time in a long while, she was faced with a choice, one that felt selfish yet essential. If she was going to turn things around, if she was going to heal, she had to start by taking care of herself. Not for Julie. Not for anyone else. But for Mary. The thought felt strange at first. She wasn't used to putting herself first. She was used to being the one who fixed problems, who made sure everyone else was okay, who held the world together in her own quiet way. But now, Mary was the one who needed fixing. And it was time to start. With a deep breath, Mary grabbed her journal and began to write. I need to take control of my health again. I need to feel like myself. I need to heal, but I have to start by believing that I can. This was the first time in years that Mary had written something for herself. Not a grocery list. Not a lesson plan. Not a to-do list. Just a simple statement of intent. She wasn't sure how baking soda was going to fix anything, but it was a start. And that, for now, was enough. Mary's mornings had always been her time. She woke up early, before the sun, and spent a few quiet moments in her garden, surrounded by the blooming hydrangeas and the roses that she and Paul had planted together so many years ago. She would sip her coffee slowly, watching the world wake up with her. It was peaceful. A time of reflection. A time of solitude. But today, everything felt different. She couldn't shake the weight of the last few days, the way the pain in her chest still hadn't completely gone away, how her mind kept drifting back to the doctor's words. Your body is shutting down, piece by piece. Those words haunted her. She had tried to push them aside, tried to ignore the sinking feeling in her gut. But it was hard when her body seemed to be sending her new signals every day. Sharp pains in her joints, stiffness that wouldn't go away, and the ever-present fatigue that weighed down on her like a 1,000-pound blanket. Mary wasn't sure how much more she could take. And so, she found herself standing in the kitchen again that morning, staring at the small glass of water in front of her, with a half-teaspoon of baking soda at the bottom. It seemed absurd. Ridiculous, even. But something inside her pushed her forward. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the change I need. She took a deep breath and drank it down in one swift motion, forcing herself to swallow the bitter taste. It felt like nothing. No magical transformation. No immediate relief. Just water. Just a white powder dissolving into nothing. But as she set the empty glass down on the counter, something shifted. Not in her body, at least not yet, but in her mind. She realized that she had reached a breaking point. This was no longer just about the pain or the discomfort. This was about her life, her future. It was about taking control of something that had spiraled out of her grasp for too long. The day dragged on, each hour feeling like a heavy weight on her shoulders. She went through the motions, making phone calls, responding to emails, preparing dinner. But her mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts kept returning to the same question: what if I'm really running out of time? That night, after another sleepless evening spent staring at the ceiling, Mary had a phone call with Julie. It was the same routine, checking in, exchanging pleasantries, and a promise that Julie would come to visit soon. But Mary had to ask. She had to know. Julie, Mary hesitated, her voice quieter than usual. I don't know how much longer I can do this. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mary could almost hear Julie's busy life humming in the background, the clinking of dishes, the distant chatter of colleagues. It felt like she was a world away. Mom, what are you talking about? You're fine. I just talked to you last week, and you sounded great. Mary swallowed hard. I don't feel fine, Julie. I'm really struggling. I'm not the same person I was. I feel like I'm falling apart. Julie's voice softened, and for a moment, Mary could hear the worry in her daughter's tone. What's going on, Mom? You need to see a doctor, right? You should come out here for a visit, and we'll take care of everything. It wasn't the first time Julie had suggested this. But Mary knew it wasn't that simple. There was no fixing her loneliness with a visit. And there was no magic cure for what she was going through. What Mary needed, what she craved, was not someone else to take care of her, but for her to take care of herself. I'm not sure a visit is going to make a difference, sweetie, Mary said, her voice thick with emotion. I've been to doctors. I've been doing everything I can, and it's just not enough. Julie was quiet for a moment, and then she sighed. I know you're scared, Mom. But you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you. Mary closed her eyes, the words washing over her, but they didn't quite reach her heart. She doesn't understand. No one does. I know you are, darling, she said softly, her voice cracking. But sometimes, I just feel like I'm invisible. That night, Mary's mind wouldn't stop racing. She lay in bed, tossing and turning, replaying her conversation with Julie over and over again. Was she really invisible? Was she just a shadow in her own life? The more she thought about it, the more the weight of those words pressed down on her chest. Invisible. She had spent so many years helping others, building a life for others, that she had forgotten to build one for herself. And now, here she was, watching the years slip away, one agonizing moment at a time. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding. It wasn't just her body that was failing her, it was her mind. Her own beliefs about herself had become a prison, one that she had locked herself into. She was so focused on what she couldn't do that she had lost sight of what she could. She had spent her whole life being there for everyone else. It was time for her to be there for herself. The next morning, as Mary stood in her kitchen once more, she made a decision. She wasn't going to let her health problems define her. She wasn't going to let the loneliness swallow her whole. She would fight back, starting with the small things. The things that felt silly. The things that felt like nothing but might, in the end, become something more. She opened the cupboard and grabbed the box of baking soda. She had no idea what this journey would look like, or how long it would take. But for the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. The first few days after Mary had started using baking soda didn't bring any immediate miracles. She wasn't expecting them, of course, but there was still a small part of her that hoped for something, a sign that this new routine might be the answer to her struggles. She had begun sprinkling baking soda into her water in the mornings, just as the internet advice suggested. She'd read about its potential health benefits, how it could help with everything from indigestion to inflammation, and even detoxing the body. It all seemed too simple to be true. But with her health deteriorating and her options running out, Mary figured there was no harm in trying. She also started using baking soda in other ways, sprinkling it on her joints to soothe the pain, adding it to her bath to relax her muscles, even brushing her teeth with it. Every night before bed, she'd add a spoonful to a glass of water, then sit back and wait. At first, there was no change. Her joints still ached. Her sleep was still disrupted. The fatigue remained. But something else was happening, something subtle but unmistakable. The more she focused on the baking soda, the more she became aware of the way her body was reacting to the treatment. She didn't feel worse, and that, in itself, was a small victory. It was the following week when Mary made the strange discovery. It happened on a Wednesday morning, just like any other day. She had woken up early, prepared her coffee, and sat in her usual spot by the window, watching the sun rise over the neighborhood. The birds chirped, the world slowly started to wake up, and for the first time in weeks, Mary felt a tiny flutter of energy deep inside her. As the morning passed and Mary went about her day, watering her plants, reading her favorite novel, and preparing lunch, she realized something startling: she wasn't in pain. Not in the way she usually was. There was still some tightness in her joints, sure, but it wasn't the unbearable ache she had been used to. Her back didn't hurt as much, and the usual stiffness in her hands was barely noticeable. Her mind raced. Could it be the baking soda? Could it actually be working? She reached for the journal she had been writing in each day, the one where she had started documenting her thoughts and feelings. With shaky hands, she opened it to the last entry. I'm tired of feeling invisible. I'm tired of living like this. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not ready to give up yet. Starting today, I'm going to believe in the possibility of change. Even if it's just one small step at a time. Mary's eyes lingered on the words, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. She wasn't completely healed, not by any means, but she could feel the shift. The energy was returning. The hope was there. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but it was a beginning. And that was enough. That afternoon, after a quick nap to recharge, Mary ventured into town. She hadn't been out much lately, mostly sticking to her home, focusing on small changes in her daily routine. But something inside her urged her to go. Maybe it was the faint spark of energy she felt, or maybe it was just the desire to see the world outside her front door again. Whatever the reason, Mary found herself driving down Main Street, the town she had known her entire life. As she drove past the local bakery, the smell of freshly baked bread wafted through the air. She smiled to herself, remembering how she used to bake with Paul on weekends. Those were the days when the kitchen was filled with laughter and love. She pulled into the parking lot and parked in front of the bakery. As she walked in, the warmth and sweetness of the place greeted her. Behind the counter stood Ella, a young woman who had taken over the family bakery after her parents retired. Ella was always kind, and over the years, Mary had gotten to know her well. The two women shared a bond over baking, and it had become a tradition for Mary to stop by every week to buy a loaf of bread or a fresh pie. "Well, it's so good to see you," Ella said, handing her a freshly baked baguette. "How's everything going? I heard from your daughter that you've been having some health issues." Mary hesitated for a moment before answering. She wasn't used to talking about her health problems with others, especially with the way she had been feeling lately. But there was something comforting about Ella's kindness, and she found herself opening up. "I've been struggling," Mary said, her voice quiet. "I've had joint pain, fatigue, and just this feeling of, I don't know, being run down. But lately, something's been changing. I started using baking soda, just in my water, mostly, and, well, I think it's starting to help. It's small, but it's something. Ella raised an eyebrow in surprise. Baking soda? Really? I've heard some people swear by it for different things. It's amazing how such a simple thing can make a difference. Mary nodded. I never would have thought it would work. But here I am. Ella smiled warmly, a little laughter in her eyes. Well, sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference. I'm glad to hear it's helping. You deserve to feel better. Mary left the bakery with a fresh baguette in hand and a new sense of hope in her heart. It wasn't just the baking soda. It was the connection with others, the reminder that there were people out there who cared. It was a small moment of human warmth in a world that often felt cold. As she drove home, Mary reflected on what she had learned. She was still on a journey, still working on healing, still making small steps forward, but she wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. Mary had been using baking soda for almost a month now, and the changes, though subtle, were becoming harder to ignore. The aches and pains in her joints had eased a little more each day, and the fatigue that had once felt like a constant weight was starting to lift. It wasn't a miracle, but it was progress. Small, gradual progress, and that was enough for her to keep going. She had begun incorporating it into other parts of her life. She mixed it into her morning smoothies, swishing it in her mouth for a fresh feeling, and even sprinkled a little in her morning bath to soothe her tired muscles. Each step, no matter how small, felt like an act of self-care, a reminder that she was taking charge of her own well-being. For the first time in a long while, Mary felt like she was gaining control over something, anything. It wasn't just the physical changes, though. There was something else, something she couldn't quite explain. It was as if the baking soda had become a symbol, a reminder of the resilience she had lost over the years. It reminded her that she wasn't helpless in the face of her health issues. She wasn't just waiting to fall apart. She could fight back. She could do something about it. It was a Saturday when Mary noticed the most surprising change. She had spent the morning cleaning the house, dusting, sweeping, organizing, something she hadn't had the energy to do in months. She had even gone through a few boxes of old clothes, donating things she hadn't worn in years. It felt good to declutter, to reclaim her space. The house, once filled with memories of Paul, felt less heavy now. More like hers again. Around noon, she decided to take a break and sit out on the porch, where the sun was shining brightly. The warmth of it on her skin felt like a gift, something so simple yet so vital. As she sat there, sipping her iced tea, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Julie. Mom, how are you feeling? I've been thinking about you a lot. I miss you. Let's talk soon. Mary smiled softly, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she thought about how to respond. She hadn't mentioned the changes in her health to Julie yet. It wasn't that she didn't want to, she just hadn't found the right moment. It had been such a personal journey for her, and part of her wasn't sure if she could explain it all. Baking soda? How could she put that into words without sounding like she was grasping at straws? But something in her heart urged her to share. Julie had been her rock throughout the years. Even if she didn't fully understand what Mary was going through, she would listen. So, Mary typed out her response. You won't believe it, but I've been feeling better. A little at a time. I started using baking soda in different ways, water, baths, even brushing my teeth with it. And I think it's actually helping. I know it sounds strange, but it's working. My pain has eased, and I have more energy than I've had in months. She stared at the message for a moment, unsure of how Julie would react. Would she think it was ridiculous? Would she brush it off? But then the phone buzzed again, and Julie's reply popped up. Wow, that's amazing, Mom. I didn't expect that. I guess sometimes it's the simplest things, huh? I'm glad you're feeling better. I know it's been tough, and I'm proud of you for sticking with it. Let's talk more soon. I love you. Mary felt a warm surge of love for her daughter. She had always been there for her, but now, more than ever, it felt like Julie was the anchor that kept her grounded. The two of them had a bond that could withstand anything. But even though Mary appreciated Julie's support, there was something that still tugged at her heart. The distance between them, physically and emotionally, had grown over the years. Julie was busy with her own life, building her career, and starting a family. Mary wasn't sure when or how it had happened, but somewhere along the way, she had stopped being a part of the active fabric of her daughter's life. She wasn't the first person Julie called with good news or bad. And Mary longed for that connection again. The days that followed brought more of the same gradual improvement. Her sleep was getting better, and she found herself waking up feeling less stiff, less drained. She could go for walks around the block without feeling completely winded. The changes weren't dramatic, but they were enough to give her hope. It was on a Thursday afternoon that she made another unexpected discovery. Mary had been out in her garden, pulling weeds and trimming some overgrown bushes when she noticed something strange. Her hands, which had always been her weak point, were no longer swollen. The joints were still a little stiff, but they weren't painful. For the first time in years, she could hold the gardening tools without wincing. She paused, her fingers gently running over the tools in her hands, almost in disbelief. It wasn't just her hands, though. Her whole body felt lighter. The fatigue that had once defined her every move was slowly slipping away. She stood up straighter, her posture improving without her even thinking about it. Could it really be this simple? That night, Mary sat in her living room, reflecting on everything she had been through, the pain, the loneliness, the uncertainty. And yet, in some strange way, this journey with baking soda was more than just about health. It was about rediscovering herself. It was about reclaiming her life, piece by piece. She had spent so many years putting others first, living for others, that she had forgotten how to live for herself. Now, at 72, she was starting to remember who she was. The baking soda had become more than just a remedy. It had become a symbol of her resilience. The simplest of solutions, something that had been in her kitchen cupboard all along, had sparked a transformation. It wasn't magic. It wasn't an overnight cure. But it was a step, a small, powerful step in the right direction. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the weeks went by, Mary began to notice other small shifts in her life. Things were changing, not just in her health but in her mindset, too. She had been so focused on the physical improvements that she hadn't stopped to realize that the act of using baking soda was also transforming her mental state. It wasn't just about relief from pain or feeling more energetic, it was about rediscovering a sense of purpose. One morning, as she sipped her usual glass of water with a teaspoon of baking soda, Mary thought back to the last few months. It was hard to believe how far she had come. She had been so lost in the fog of chronic pain and exhaustion, she hadn't imagined anything could change. Now, there she was, walking through the day with more energy, less pain, and a clearer mind. Her thoughts drifted to Paul. He had always been the one to push her to try new things. Back when they were both younger, he'd been the adventurous one, always testing out new recipes, new ideas, new ways of doing things. When he had passed away, Mary had let a part of herself go. She had closed herself off, retreating into the comfortable, predictable routine she'd established without him. But now, in this quiet way, the simple act of trying something new, baking soda, was like an invitation back to life. An invitation to experiment, to learn, to grow again. She had always been curious about the world, but somehow, the years had dulled that curiosity. Now, with every small change in her health, she found herself opening up to new possibilities. Maybe she could try other natural remedies, maybe there were other ways to improve her life that didn't require drastic measures or expensive treatments. Maybe, just maybe, she was on the verge of discovering something that could not only improve her health but transform the way she saw the world. It was on a Friday morning that Mary's curiosity got the better of her. After months of seeing small improvements with baking soda, she decided it was time to take the next step: research. She had only scratched the surface with the remedy so far. What else could she learn about baking soda's potential health benefits? What had others discovered? Sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, she pulled out her laptop. The screen lit up, and she began to type in the search bar. Baking soda health benefits. She wasn't sure what she expected to find, but her eyes widened as she scrolled through the results. Articles, blog posts, and videos flooded her screen, all offering new insights into the power of baking soda. Some of the claims seemed outlandish. Baking soda can help balance your pH levels, reduce inflammation, detox your body, even cure acne, but others seemed more grounded in evidence. One article, in particular, caught her eye. It was written by a holistic health expert who explained the science behind baking soda's effects on the body. Mary read with interest, learning how baking soda's alkaline properties could help neutralize excess acid in the body and support digestion. It was fascinating. She had never thought of it in those terms before. What if this simple, everyday substance was more powerful than anyone realized? What if it could unlock the healing potential her body had been longing for? The more she read, the more she felt her confidence grow. It wasn't just about the baking soda, it was about taking charge of her health in a way she hadn't done before. She wasn't dependent on doctors or medications to fix her problems. She could be part of the solution. She could play an active role in her well-being. After an hour of reading, Mary had compiled a list of new ideas to try. She didn't want to overwhelm herself, but there were several approaches she wanted to experiment with. From using baking soda to support detoxification to applying it topically for skin issues, the possibilities seemed endless. But she wasn't in a hurry to dive into everything all at once. She was learning to trust the process, slow and steady, one step at a time. Later that afternoon, after a quick walk around the block, Mary decided to experiment with one of the ideas she had read about, a baking soda face mask. Her skin, like her joints, had been showing signs of age. There were fine lines, and her complexion had lost some of its youthful glow. While the wrinkles didn't bother her, the dullness did. Maybe, just maybe, this baking soda mask could give her skin the fresh start it needed. She mixed a teaspoon of baking soda with a little water to form a paste, then gently applied it to her face, avoiding her eyes. As she sat there, letting the mask dry, Mary found herself feeling calm and centered. The simple act of self-care was as soothing to her spirit as it was to her skin. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to relax. As the mask dried, she thought again about all the little changes that had been happening. The pain had reduced significantly, her energy levels were better, and even her mood had lifted. Could all of this really be because of something as simple as baking soda? After a few minutes, she washed the mask off, patting her face dry with a towel. Her skin felt softer, more refreshed. It wasn't a drastic transformation, but there was a noticeable difference, a glow that had been missing for some time. She smiled at her reflection in the mirror. It was small, but it was a victory. That night, as Mary sat down for dinner with her plate of grilled chicken, salad, and a side of roasted vegetables, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel defeated by her health issues. She wasn't resigned to the idea that this was just how life was going to be. She had options. She could make changes. And even though the journey was far from over, she felt like she was on the right path. Julie called that evening, and after a bit of small talk, Mary told her about her latest discovery, the face mask. Julie laughed and told her she'd have to try it, too. "You're really into this baking soda thing, huh?" Julie said, her voice warm. "I'm so glad to hear you're feeling better." I really think you found something good here, Mom. Mary smiled, her heart swelling with love. I think I have, too. It's not just the baking soda, it's the fact that I'm finally doing something for myself. Julie's voice softened. I'm proud of you, Mom. Mary sat back in her chair, feeling lighter than she had in years. There was still so much to discover, so much more she could try. But for now, she was content. She had found a small solution to a big problem, and that was more than enough. Mary had become something she hadn't been in a long time, curious. For years, she'd been stuck in a cycle of routine, repeating the same things over and over, hoping for change but never seeking it. But now, with each passing day, her curiosity was blossoming again, and it wasn't just about baking soda anymore. It was about what else she could discover, about health, about life, and about herself. It wasn't that she was suddenly full of boundless energy or bursting with optimism. No, it was more subtle than that. It was like the fog had started to lift. Her pain was still there, but it was more manageable, less all-consuming. The fatigue was fading slowly, but it was enough to notice. And with each small victory, she began to believe that she was capable of making even bigger changes in her life. Her newfound interest in natural remedies was one thing, but something else had begun to change as well. She had started thinking more about her life outside of her home, outside of the world she had created for herself in the quiet corners of her house. Her connection to others, especially to Julie, was deepening. Her daughter's encouragement had been a lifeline, one that had pulled her from the edge of isolation. Julie hadn't been around physically as much, but every time they spoke, Mary felt a little less alone. On Monday morning, after she finished her usual morning routine, water with baking soda, stretching, and a little journaling, Mary decided to step outside her comfort zone again. She reached for her phone and pulled up a number she hadn't dialed in ages, her old friend, Linda. Linda had been her closest friend for over 20 years. They had raised their children together, gone through the ups and downs of life's milestones side by side. But after Paul passed, Mary had drifted from Linda. She hadn't meant to, but there had been so much grief, so much of her own pain, that she'd stopped reaching out. She had let the years go by, and now, the gap between them felt wider than ever. But today, Mary decided, was the day to bridge that gap. She needed to reconnect, not just because she missed Linda, but because she realized something important: life was short, and she didn't want to keep living in the shadows of her own fear. She took a deep breath and dialed the number. It rang 3 times before Linda answered. Mary? Is that really you? Linda's voice sounded surprised, but in a way that made Mary feel instantly at ease. It's me, Mary said, a smile spreading across her face. I've been meaning to call, but you know how it is, life just gets away from you. Tell me about it, Linda replied with a soft laugh. I've missed you. How have you been? Mary paused, her heart swelling with the simple question. It felt good to be asked. It felt good to be seen again. I've been better, actually. You wouldn't believe it, but I've been feeling healthier. I started using baking soda for a few things, kind of a weird remedy, I know, but it's been helping me a lot. I feel more like myself again. Linda's voice softened, filled with warmth and curiosity. Baking soda? Well, I'm glad something's helping. You've been through so much, Mary. I'm happy to hear that you're feeling better. The conversation flowed easily from there. They laughed, reminisced about the old days, and shared stories of their families. Linda was still living in the same house, but her kids were grown now, and her husband had retired. It felt like no time had passed, even though Mary knew it had been years since they'd really talked. As they wrapped up the conversation, Linda suggested, you should come over soon. I'd love to catch up in person. Maybe we could even do something, take a walk, grab coffee, something fun. Mary hesitated for a moment, the old voice of doubt whispering in her ear. Could she really go back to being the Mary who laughed with Linda, who could just relax and be herself again? It felt so long ago. But then she remembered how good it had felt to have this conversation, how her heart had lightened with each word. It was time to stop holding herself back. "I'd love that, Linda," Mary said, her voice full of sincerity. "Let's plan for next week." The next few days passed quickly, and as they did, Mary found herself eagerly anticipating her visit to Linda's house. It wasn't just about reconnecting with her old friend, it was about taking another step toward rediscovering her own life. Every decision she made now seemed to carry more weight, and it was no longer just about managing her health. It was about opening herself up to the world again. Julie, as always, was supportive of the idea. "I'm so happy to hear you're going to see Linda," she said over the phone one evening. "You've always been there for each other. I know it'll feel good to be together again." Mary smiled, feeling that familiar warmth in her chest. She realized, in that moment, that her life didn't have to be defined by isolation or by loss. She could be a part of the world again. She didn't have to be perfect or whole, just present. When the day of her visit to Linda arrived, Mary got dressed carefully, choosing a light cardigan and a pair of soft, comfortable shoes. She didn't want to overdo it, but she wanted to look nice. She looked in the mirror one last time before she left, her reflection staring back at her, different, somehow. She wasn't the same woman she had been when Paul was alive. She wasn't the same woman she had been a few months ago. But she was still here. Still trying. Still fighting. And that was enough. When Mary arrived at Linda's house, they embraced tightly, like two people who hadn't seen each other in years, even though the time apart had been only a few months. As they sat down to chat, Linda offered her a cup of tea, and they reminisced about the past while catching up on all the little things in each other's lives. It felt natural. Comfortable. Like slipping back into an old pair of shoes that had been left at the door, waiting to be worn again. And in that moment, Mary knew that this was only the beginning. She had made progress with her health, but there was still so much to explore. There was so much life left to live. She didn't have all the answers, but she was no longer afraid to ask the questions. She was learning, step by step, that growth wasn't just about the big moments, it was about the small decisions. The ones that moved her toward healing, toward connection, and toward the person she was becoming. Mary's visit to Linda's house became a turning point for her. That afternoon, wrapped in the comfort of familiar conversation, she realized something important: connection, real, honest connection, was a form of healing in itself. It wasn't just about the physical remedies she had been exploring, like baking soda, it was about the way people could lift each other up, share their stories, and offer support. She had been so focused on fixing herself, so determined to solve her physical struggles, that she had forgotten the power of human interaction. Linda, with her unfiltered laughter and easygoing nature, had reminded Mary of something she hadn't thought about in a long time: life wasn't just about getting through the day. It was about sharing moments with others, about creating bonds, about showing up for the people you care about. It wasn't always the grand gestures or the life-changing conversations that mattered most. Sometimes, it was just sitting with someone in silence or reminiscing about old memories. The days following her visit, Mary found herself thinking about her relationships more often. She started to reach out to people she had lost touch with, whether it was old friends or distant relatives. The truth was, she had built walls around herself after Paul's death, and those walls had kept her from connecting with others. But now, as she felt herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally, she realized it was time to take those walls down. One evening, she called her cousin Beth, someone she had shared many childhood memories with but hadn't spoken to in years. Beth had moved to another state, and their communication had become sporadic at best. "Beth, it's Mary," she said when Beth answered the phone. "I was thinking about you the other day, and I realized I've missed our conversations. I'd love to catch up." There was a long pause before Beth responded. "Mary? It's been ages. I'd love that. How are you? Really, how are you doing?" For the first time in a long time, Mary allowed herself to be open. She wasn't just giving a polite, "I'm fine" response. She told Beth about her health improvements, about how baking soda had been helping her feel better, and about how she had started to reconnect with the world around her. She talked about the things that had changed, the way she felt more alive, more present, more willing to embrace life's uncertainties. Beth listened attentively, and when Mary had finished speaking, she responded warmly. "You sound like you found something real, Mary. I'm so happy to hear that. You've always been so strong, but I think you're realizing just how much strength you've got inside you." The conversation flowed easily after that. They spoke for nearly an hour, catching up on everything from family updates to what each of them had been doing with their time. Mary found herself laughing, reminiscing about the summers they'd spent together at their grandparents' house. It felt good to be in the moment again, to share a piece of herself with someone she cared about. By the time the call ended, Mary felt lighter than she had in a long time. There was something about reaching out, about breaking through the isolation, that made her feel more connected to the world. She wasn't just healing physically, she was healing emotionally, too. The following week, Mary received an unexpected call from her niece, Sophie. Sophie had heard about Mary's improved health from Beth, and she wanted to know more. It was clear from the conversation that Sophie had been following Mary's journey from a distance, and she was eager to learn about the changes Mary had been making. "I can't believe it, Aunt Mary," Sophie said excitedly. "I remember you being so exhausted all the time, and now you're telling me you're feeling better. That's incredible." Mary chuckled softly. "It's been a gradual process, Sophie. It's not just the baking soda. It's been about looking at life differently, taking small steps to make changes. And yes, there's been progress." Sophie was full of questions, and Mary shared everything she had learned about baking soda, about the little things she had done to improve her energy levels, and about how she had begun to connect with people again. She told Sophie about her visit with Linda, how reconnecting with an old friend had made her realize how important relationships were to her well-being. "You know, Aunt Mary," Sophie said thoughtfully, "I think that's what I need to work on too. I've been so busy with school and work that I've kind of lost touch with a lot of people. Maybe I need to focus more on the relationships that matter to me." Mary nodded, even though Sophie couldn't see her. "You're right, sweetheart. Sometimes, it's easy to get caught up in the busyness of life. But at the end of the day, it's the people we care about who give us strength, who remind us of what's important." After the call, Mary sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on everything she had shared with Sophie. She realized how much she had been holding back for years, afraid of being vulnerable or of asking for help. But now, she was discovering that asking for help, reaching out to others, wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of strength, of courage. It was a way of saying, "I'm human, and I need others to thrive." That evening, after dinner, Mary took a moment to write in her journal, something she had started doing more regularly. The pen flowed easily across the page, as if the words were waiting to be released. She wrote about the power of connection, about how the relationships in her life were becoming just as important as her physical health. She wrote about the way her heart felt lighter with each person she reached out to, each conversation that reminded her that she wasn't alone in her struggles. For so long, she had been focused on fixing herself, on finding the one thing that would solve her problems. But now, she realized that the solution wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of everything: the small daily changes she was making to her health, the support of her family and friends, and, perhaps most importantly, the willingness to be open, to let others in. Mary closed her journal and leaned back in her chair, feeling a quiet peace settle in her chest. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, she felt hopeful. She had found a new kind of strength, one that wasn't just physical. It was the strength to connect, to be vulnerable, and to embrace life, with all its challenges and rewards. The more Mary thought about the conversations she'd had with Linda, Beth, and Sophie, the more she realized something profound: she was standing at the edge of something new, something unknown. She'd spent years in the comfort of routine, shielded by walls of grief, pain, and self-doubt. But now, everything was shifting. She wasn't just surviving, she was slowly learning how to thrive again, even in the face of uncertainty. It wasn't easy. Each day presented a new challenge, a new question that she hadn't quite figured out how to answer. How could she continue to balance her health while opening herself up to the world? Could she maintain the changes she'd started to make, or would old habits resurface when things got tough? There were so many unknowns. But for the first time, instead of shying away from the uncertainty, Mary found herself leaning into it. It felt like a quiet kind of rebellion, defying the instinct to stay safe and comfortable, and instead choosing to step forward, even when she didn't have all the answers. The past few days had been busy. Mary had spent time reconnecting with family, enjoying the simple joy of shared laughter and stories. She had begun taking daily walks around the neighborhood, the fresh air and sunshine bringing her a sense of peace she hadn't felt in ages. And, of course, she had kept up with her morning routine, the baking soda mixture still a key part of her mornings. But now, the next step loomed large before her, the unknown. One morning, while sipping her lemon and baking soda drink, Mary decided to take another leap. She had been thinking about a conversation with Julie, one where her daughter had mentioned the possibility of attending a wellness retreat. It had sounded intriguing at the time, but now, as Mary sat quietly with her thoughts, she realized that perhaps this was exactly what she needed. A wellness retreat. An immersive experience where she could step away from her daily life, focus on herself, and learn more about holistic health. It seemed like the next logical step, a way to deepen her journey and push herself outside of her comfort zone. But the thought of it also filled her with anxiety. Would she be ready? Was she strong enough to commit to something like this, especially when it involved stepping into the unknown with people she didn't know? The questions tumbled around in her mind like stones in a river, and for a moment, she felt paralyzed by the uncertainty. As she sat there, her phone buzzed with a message from Julie. "Hey, Mom, I was thinking about the retreat. I know it's a big decision, but I think it could be really good for you. You've come so far already. Don't let fear hold you back. You deserve this." Mary stared at the screen for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she typed a reply. Julie's words echoed in her mind, reminding her that sometimes the greatest growth came from embracing the things that scared her the most. With a deep breath, Mary typed back, "You're right. I think it's time to take that step. I'll call and get more information." The next day, after some research, Mary found a wellness retreat that seemed like a perfect fit. It wasn't too far from home, and it promised a balance of physical activity, mindfulness, and nutrition, everything she'd been learning about lately. After a few more calls and some planning, she signed up. The moment she clicked the "Confirm" button, her heart raced. She had made a commitment to herself, to her health, and to the journey that lay ahead. But as soon as the nervousness settled in, something else began to stir. Excitement. Excitement about the unknown. The weeks leading up to the retreat were filled with anticipation and preparation. Mary continued her daily routines, and each day brought with it new moments of clarity. Her energy was growing, and so was her sense of purpose. She knew that this retreat would be a challenge, but it would also be an opportunity to learn more about herself, to push past the doubts and fears that had held her back for so long. Julie was thrilled for her. "Mom, I think this is going to be life-changing," she said on the phone one evening. "I'm so proud of you for taking this leap." "I'm proud of me, too," Mary replied, smiling softly. "It feels like I'm finally ready to step into a new chapter." The day of the retreat arrived, and Mary packed her bags with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She had planned carefully, comfortable clothes, toiletries, a journal, and plenty of books to read during downtime. She felt oddly grown up, like she was setting off on an adventure of sorts, one that would challenge her in ways she couldn't yet predict. As she drove to the retreat center, the winding roads took her further and further from the familiar. The trees seemed to stretch toward the sky, and the air was fresh and crisp. When she arrived, she was greeted by a warm, welcoming staff who showed her to her room, a simple, cozy space with soft lighting and a view of the surrounding forest. The retreat center felt like a sanctuary, a place where she could let go of her worries and focus entirely on her well-being. That evening, the retreat began with an introductory session, where the guests gathered to meet one another and hear about the schedule for the week. Mary sat quietly in the circle, observing the people around her. There were individuals of all ages, some of whom had traveled from far away, each with their own reasons for being here. Some were focused on physical health, others on mental clarity, and a few were there simply to escape the chaos of their daily lives. But in that room, there was a shared sense of openness, a willingness to embrace something new, something different. As the facilitator spoke about the importance of being present in the moment, Mary felt a sense of calm settle over her. She wasn't sure what the week would bring, but she knew one thing for certain: she was exactly where she needed to be. That night, as she lay in bed, Mary reflected on her journey. She thought about the days spent healing at home, the small steps she had taken to reconnect with others, and the strength she had found within herself. She realized that this retreat, this journey into the unknown, was simply another step in her ongoing transformation. The future was still uncertain, but Mary no longer felt afraid of it. She was learning to trust in the process, to embrace whatever came her way. And as she closed her eyes that night, she smiled softly, knowing that the best was yet to come. The first full day of the retreat was everything Mary had hoped for, and more. The schedule was packed, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, she found herself energized. After a light breakfast, the group gathered for a yoga session that focused on mindfulness and breathing. It was a gentle introduction to the concept of being truly present in the moment, something Mary had only recently begun to understand. As she moved through the poses, trying to keep her balance and focus, she realized how much her mind tended to race. It was like her thoughts were always 5 steps ahead, worrying about the future, regretting the past, and rarely settling into the here and now. But today, she tried something new. She let go of the pressure to get it right, choosing instead to simply breathe, to be in the moment. And to her surprise, the experience was calming, transformative even. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace with herself. After yoga, the group gathered for a meditation session. The facilitator, a calm woman named Eva, guided them through a series of deep breathing exercises, encouraging everyone to focus on their intentions for the retreat. As the minutes passed, Mary found herself becoming more and more aware of the gentle hum of her own body, the steady rise and fall of her chest with each breath. It felt like something was unlocking inside her, like layers of tension were peeling away. At the end of the session, Mary felt both relaxed and energized, an odd but welcome combination. She smiled to herself, realizing that she had been holding on to so much stress for so long, both physically and emotionally. But today, she was starting to let go. The day's activities continued with a healthy, plant-based lunch followed by a nature walk through the forest. As they walked along the winding trails, the group was encouraged to reflect on their personal journeys. Mary found herself walking beside another guest, a woman named Claire, who had a similar story to hers. Claire had struggled with her health for years and had turned to holistic healing methods to improve her life. "I've been where you are," Claire said, glancing over at Mary with a sympathetic smile. "I was lost for so long, feeling like I was just surviving. But coming here, learning to slow down and listen to my body, has been life-changing." Mary nodded, appreciating the connection. It was strange, she thought, how even though they had only just met, there was an unspoken bond between them. It was as if they understood each other on a level that words couldn't reach. Later, as the group gathered for a workshop on nutrition, Mary found herself deeply engaged. The facilitator, a nutritionist named Kate, spoke passionately about the benefits of whole foods and how the body responds to natural, unprocessed ingredients. For the first time, Mary realized how disconnected she had been from her own body's needs. She had relied on shortcuts, like quick fixes or fad diets, instead of listening to her body and nourishing it with the foods it craved. It was in this workshop that Mary had her first major revelation. She'd been so focused on healing her body with external remedies, like the baking soda she had been using, that she had neglected the internal work, listening to her body, nourishing it, and allowing it to heal naturally. The baking soda had been a great start, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. That evening, as she sat with a journal in hand, Mary reflected on everything she had learned so far. She had begun to appreciate the power of small, consistent changes, whether it was through diet, exercise, or simply being more mindful in her everyday interactions. She wasn't the person she used to be. She had come so far already, but she realized that the journey was far from over. In that moment, Mary felt a deep sense of gratitude. The retreat had given her the space to reflect on her life, her health, and her future. But more importantly, it had given her the tools to move forward with intention, to continue growing and evolving. Over the next few days, the retreat continued to provide Mary with moments of introspection and growth. She had learned about the importance of self-care, not just for the body but for the mind and spirit as well. She had made deep connections with other guests, many of whom had similar struggles and had found their own paths to healing. But it was the final session that truly solidified her transformation. The group gathered for a closing ceremony, a time to reflect on everything they had experienced and learned. Each person was invited to share one thing they were grateful for, and Mary felt a sense of pride as she stood up to speak. "I'm grateful for this space," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "For the chance to slow down and really listen, to my body, to my heart, and to the people around me. I came here thinking I was just looking for a quick fix. But what I've found is that true healing isn't about finding a single answer. It's about embracing the process, learning to trust yourself, and knowing that you are worthy of love and care." The room was quiet as everyone took in her words. Mary felt the weight of her own growth, but she also felt a sense of peace. She wasn't done, not by a long shot, but she had come so far, and for the first time, she believed in herself completely. As the retreat ended and Mary prepared to return home, she realized that the lessons she had learned over the past few days would stay with her for the rest of her life. She no longer felt like she was waiting for the next miracle cure or secret remedy. She had learned that healing was a journey that was uniquely hers, filled with moments of discovery, vulnerability, and growth. With a newfound sense of peace, Mary drove back home, knowing that this chapter in her life had come to a close, but another, even more powerful chapter, was about to begin. The drive back home was peaceful, but Mary couldn't help feeling a little overwhelmed by all she had experienced. The retreat had been life-changing, there was no denying that. The peace she had felt during those few days in the mountains had been profound, but now, as she approached her familiar neighborhood, she found herself wondering if she could hold on to that sense of calm and purpose in her everyday life. The truth was, she had spent so many years focused on surviving that she had never really given herself the chance to live. Now, that was about to change. As she pulled into her driveway, Mary took a deep breath. She was home, yes, but she was not the same woman who had left. She had grown, learned, and transformed in ways that felt almost too large for words. But what mattered most was this: she had begun to reclaim her life, piece by piece. The next few days were filled with a new kind of rhythm. Mary had already started incorporating many of the lessons from the retreat into her daily life. The mindfulness practices, the healthy eating habits, the slow walks through the neighborhood, she embraced each of them with open arms, knowing that they were the building blocks of a new, healthier life. But it wasn't just about the physical changes. It was about embracing the idea that healing wasn't linear. Some days were better than others, and that was okay. The most important thing was that she was no longer afraid to take those small, purposeful steps forward. Her relationship with her family had also deepened. She had shared stories from the retreat with Julie, and her daughter had been thrilled to hear about her progress. "Mom, I'm so proud of you," Julie said, her voice warm with affection. "It's amazing to see you this way." "I'm proud of me, too," Mary replied, a small laugh escaping her lips. It's been a long time coming. But as much as the changes were internal, they were starting to manifest externally, too. Mary had always been a creature of habit, but now, she was more open to the unknown. That meant saying yes to things she might have once turned down, inviting friends over for dinner, joining a local walking group, even signing up for a cooking class she had always been curious about. She was no longer living in the shadows of her past. She was living in the present, carving out a new life filled with possibilities. One afternoon, as she was walking through the park, Mary ran into Linda and Beth, two of the women she had met at the retreat. They were laughing and chatting as they strolled along the path, and when they spotted Mary, they waved enthusiastically. "Mary!" Linda called out, her voice full of energy. "It's so good to see you. How are you doing?" Mary smiled, feeling the warmth of their friendship. "I'm doing great, actually. Just taking everything one step at a time." Beth grinned. "You look amazing. The retreat really did wonders, didn't it?" "It really did," Mary agreed, her eyes sparkling. "I've learned so much about myself. And I feel like I'm finally ready to embrace this new chapter." The three of them spent the next hour catching up, laughing, and sharing stories. It felt good to be surrounded by people who understood her journey. They weren't just casual acquaintances. They were part of her transformation, and together, they had formed a bond that would last well beyond the retreat. As the days turned into weeks, Mary continued to thrive. She hadn't just gotten better physically, she had healed emotionally, too. She had learned how to let go of the past, to forgive herself, and to truly care for her own well-being. And as she looked forward to the future, she no longer felt weighed down by the uncertainty. She knew that the path ahead would have its challenges, but it would also hold incredible opportunities. One evening, as she stood in her kitchen preparing a meal for herself, Mary thought back to where she had been just a few months ago. The isolation, the pain, the uncertainty, it had all felt so overwhelming. But now, she stood in a space of peace. She had learned that health wasn't just about what she put in her body, but also about what she allowed into her mind and heart. And she had made space for joy. Her phone buzzed, and she saw that it was a text from Julie. "Mom, you're my inspiration. Thank you for showing me what it means to live fully." Tears welled up in Mary's eyes as she read the message. She had done it, not just for herself, but for her family. And that, more than anything, made all the hard work worthwhile. That evening, Mary sat down to reflect on everything she had learned, everything she had experienced. She thought about the ups and downs, the moments of joy and the challenges she had faced. She had started this journey feeling broken, unsure, and lost. But now, she felt whole. She had rediscovered her strength and resilience. She had opened herself up to love, to healing, and to life. As she wrote in her journal, one final thought came to mind. Healing is not about perfection. It's about progress. Mary had come so far, but she knew this was only the beginning. There were still many more steps to take, many more lessons to learn. And she was ready. Ready to embrace the unknown. Ready to keep growing. Ready to live fully. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?